Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Hey there, this is my first time posting here, or at least I think it is. I might have forgotten about a previous post, but who knows. Anyway, I've got a story for you about my boss and a company car that I think fits right in with this subreddit. So, I'm a painter by trade. I just finished my apprenticeship and got my journeyman letter, which is basically a fancy way of saying I completed my training and was now a qualified painter. Now, usually apprentices don't get company cars. That's something you have to wait for even after you become a journeyman. But my boss, let's call him Mr. Entitled, had other plans. One day Mr. Entitled calls me into his office with this smug look on his face. He's sitting there looking all important behind his desk, and he says, "We've got a new car for the company. It's going to be a pool car, but I want you to use it whenever no one else needs it." Now I'm thinking, great, a car I can use, but I should have known better. Nothing's ever that simple with Mr. Entitled, so I ask him, "So will you drive me to work tomorrow so I can take it home then?" "No, it's a pool car. It's to be parked on company ground during nights." I should have seen this coming. Mr. Entitled loves to dangle carrots in front of people's noses, only to yank them away at the last second. But two can play a bad game. I decided right then and there that I was going to follow his rules to the letter. Malicious compliance, here we go. Now, you need to understand something about my job. I usually had a 40 to 60 minute drive to get a job site. That meant I had to be at the company between 5 and 6 in the morning, depending on where I was going that day. We work from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., so you can imagine how early I had to wake up to make that happen. But remember, Mr. Entitled said the car had to stay on company grounds at night, so I wasn't about to go to the company at the crack of dawn just to drive their precious pool car to the job site. Nope, not happening. For a whole week, I showed up at the company at 7 a.m. sharp, picked up the car and drove to wherever I was supposed to be working that day. Then at 4:30 p.m., I'd drive back to the company, park the car and go home. I knew this wasn't going to fly with Mr. Entitled for long, but I was curious to see how long it would take him to blow his top. It took exactly 1 week. On Friday afternoon, Mr. Entitled calls me into his office again. He's got this red face like he's been holding his breath, and he looks like he's about to explode. He tells me he wants to write me up for not showing up to work. According to him, I have to follow the 8-hour workday rule. Now, I am no pushover. I know my rights and I know the union rules. So I decide to play dumb and push his buttons a little more. You're right. I'll start to leave the car at 4 instead of 4:30. What? No, you're supposed to be at the place at 7 and leave by 4. Well, I drive a pool car. According to the union rules, a pool car is to leave company ground at 7 and be parked by 4. That's the rules, and I have to follow them. You should have seen his face. It was like watching a balloon deflate. He knew he was cornered and there was nothing he could do about it. After a moment of sputtering and turning even redder, if that was even possible, he finally says, "I'll pick you up tomorrow by 6:15. I couldn't help but smile. I had won this round, and we both knew it. Now you'd think this would be the end of it, right? Mr. Entitled learned his lesson and we'd all move on with our lives. But oh no, that's not how entitled people work. They always have to have the last word and always have to feel like they are in control. The next morning, true to his word, Mr. Entitled shows up at my place at 6:15. He's in his fancy car looking like he'd rather be anywhere else but here. I hop in and we start to drive to the company in silence. After about 10 minutes of this uncomfortable quiet, he finally speaks up. "You know, I was trying to do you a favor with that car." I almost laughed out loud. A favor? Really? But I kept my cool and decided to hear him out. "How so?" "Well, most journeymen don't get access to a company car this early. I thought you'd appreciate the opportunity." Now, I'm not one to let an opportunity for some good old-fashioned sass go to waste, so I reply, "I do appreciate opportunities, sir, especially ones that don't require me to break union rules or work unpaid hours." I swear I could hear his teeth grinding, but he keeps his composure barely. The union rules are just guidelines. Sometimes we need to be flexible for the good of the company. Oh boy, here we go. The classic break the rules for the good of the company speech. I've heard this one before and I'm not buying it. With all due respect, sir, the union rules are there to protect workers like me. If we start bending them, where do we draw the line? He doesn't have an answer for that one. We spend the rest of the ride in silence, but I can practically hear the gears turning in his head. He is trying to figure out how to get around this, how to make me do what he wants without actually giving me the benefits I deserve. We get to the company, and as I'm about to get out of the car, he stops me. Look, let's make a deal. You can take the car home, but I expect you to be at the job site by 7 a.m. sharp. No exceptions. Now, this is interesting. He's offering what I wanted in the first place, but I'm not about to let him off the hook that easily. And what about the overtime for the extra driving I'll be doing outside of work hours? Mr. Entitled looks like he's sucking on a lemon, but he knows he's cornered. Fine, we'll log the extra time as overtime, but I expect top-notch work from you, understood? Always, sir. You know I take pride in my work. With that, I get out of the car and head to the pool car. As I'm driving to the job site, I can't help but feel a little smug. I didn't let Mr. Entitled push me around, and I even managed to get a better deal out of it. But here's the thing about entitled people, they never really learn. They might back down for a while, but they are always looking for the next opportunity to assert their perceived superiority. I knew this wasn't the end of my battles with Mr. Entitled, but for now, I had won. Over the next few weeks, things seemed to settle into a new routine. I'd take the car home, drive to job sites on time, and log my overtime for the extra driving. Mr. Entitled would give me the stink eye every now and then, but he couldn't say anything because I was following our agreement to the letter. But then about a month after our little showdown, Mr. Entitled calls me into his office again. He's got that look on his face, the one that says he thinks he's got a brilliant idea. We've been reviewing our expenses and the overtime from driving is really adding up. We need to make some changes. I knew it. I knew he couldn't let it go, so I decided to play along and see where this is going. What kind of changes did you have in mind, sir? Well, we're thinking of implementing a new policy. All employees who take company vehicles home will be responsible for their own gas for personal use. Now, this might not sound too bad at first, but remember, I'm driving this car to and from work every day. That's not personal use. That's work-related driving, so I decided to clarify. Personal use as in weekends and after-hours trip, right? Not the driving to and from work sites. Mr. Entitled shifts in his seat, looking uncomfortable. Well, we consider the drive from your work to the first job site of the day as personal use. Oh, here we go again. Time to remind Mr. Entitled about those pesky union rules he likes to forget about. Sir, I don't think that aligns with our union agreement. The drive to the first job site is considered work time, especially since I'm in a company vehicle. Mr. Entitled's face is starting to turn that familiar shade of red again. The union agreement is open to interpretation. We're just trying to manage our resources efficiently. I take a deep breath. I am getting tired of this back and forth, but I'm not about to let Mr. Entitled walk all over me or my co-workers. I say, I understand you're trying to manage resources, sir, but changing the interpretation of our agreement without consulting the union could cause problems. Maybe we should invite a union rep to discuss this new policy? The mention of involving the union makes Mr. Entitled pale a bit. He knows he's on shaky ground here. That won't be necessary. We'll review the policy again before implementing any changes. I nod, trying to hide my satisfaction. Another battle won. But the war with Mr. Entitled's entitlement is far from over. As I leave his office, I can't help but wonder what his next move will be. But whatever it is, I'll be ready. My story is about how one nasty woman in our neighborhood tried to make my life miserable just because I use a wheelchair now. But let me start from the beginning. A few months ago, I was in a terrible car accident. I was driving home from work when a drunk driver swerved into my lane and hit me head-on. The crash was devastating. I woke up in the hospital to find out I was paralyzed from the waist down. The doctor said I'd likely never walk again. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to face. Before the accident, my husband Tom and I were active in our neighborhood. We went to all the homeowners association meetings and got along well with most of our neighbors. But after I came home from the hospital, I fell into a deep depression. I didn't want to see anyone or do anything. I just stayed home feeling sorry for myself. Tom kept going to the meetings without me, but I could tell he was worried. Finally, after a couple of months, I decided I needed to stop wallowing and try to get back to normal life as much as possible. When the next HOA meeting came around, I told Tom I wanted to go with him. He was so happy to see me taking an interest in things again. When we arrived at the meeting, most of our neighbors were really welcoming. They were careful around my wheelchair but were mankind. Everyone except Karen, that is. Karen was on the HOA board and had always been difficult. But now she was openly hostile. She glared at me the whole time and wouldn't even say hello. I tried to brush it off, figuring she was just having a bad day, but it kept happening. Every time I saw Karen around the neighborhood, at the park, in a store, on the sidewalk, she gave me these nasty looks. I told Tom about it, but we agreed it wasn't worth making a big deal over. I had bigger things to worry about than one rude neighbor. That all changed at the next month's meeting. As soon as Tom wheeled me into the room, Karen marched right up to us with a scowl on her face. You shouldn't come to these meetings anymore. Disabled people make me uncomfortable. And it doesn't look good for the neighborhood to have you out in public spaces all the time. You'll drive away new home buyers. I was so stunned. I couldn't even speak. Tom, on the other hand, exploded. How dare you? My wife has every right to be here. Your comfort doesn't trump her rights as a homeowner and human being. Other neighbors jumped in too, yelling at Karen for being so cruel and discriminatory. We ended up leaving early because I was so upset. I cried for hours that night, but after a few days I realized I couldn't let Karen's awful behavior control my life. We ended up leaving early because I was so upset. I cried for hours that night, but after a few days I realized I couldn't let Karen's awful behavior control my life. This was my new reality and I needed to learn to deal with people like her. So when the next morning rolled around, I insisted on going again. And Karen completely lost it when she saw me. I told you never to show your face here again. You're so selfish. I have every right to call security and have you removed right now. Go ahead and try it. I dare you. Karen stormed over to the phone and called for the security guard. My heart was pounding as we waited for him to arrive. Tom looked ready to physically fight anyone who tried to make me leave. When the guard walked in, Karen immediately started screeching at him. This woman needs to be removed immediately. I've already told her she's not welcome at our meetings. The security guard says, Ma'am, what exactly has she done wrong? She's in a wheelchair. I already explained that disabled people make me uncomfortable and look bad for the neighborhood. The guard's face changed as he realized what was happening. He turned to Karen with a stern look. I will not be a part of illegally discriminating against someone with a disability. This woman has done nothing wrong and has every right to be here. I suggest you drop this immediately. Karen's face turned bright red as other neighbors started voicing their support for me. She was getting more and more agitated, and suddenly she grabbed a cup of water off the table and threw it in my face. I gasped in shock as the cold water soaked my shirt. For a split second the room was completely silent. Then Tom snapped. Before I could even process what was happening, he slapped Karen hard across the face. She stumbled backwards and fell to the floor. Karen sat there stunned for a moment, holding her cheek. Then she started shrieking and trying to lunge at Tom. The security guard had to physically restrain her. Someone called the police and we all gave our statements when they arrived. They asked if we wanted to press charges against Karen and we said yes without hesitation. As they put Karen in handcuffs, she was still screaming and yelling. You cannot do this to me. I'm on the HOA board. That man assaulted me. Police officer tells her, Ma'am, you're under arrest for assault and violating the American with Disabilities Act. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can well be used against you in a court of law. We watched as they put her in a police car and drove away. I was still in shock over everything that had happened. Tom knelt down next to my wheelchair and took my hand. Are you okay, honey? I'm so sorry about all of this. I know I shouldn't have hit her, but I just couldn't stand by and watch her treat you that way anymore. It's okay, I'm alright. Thank you for standing up for me. Over the next few weeks, we gave more detailed statements to the police and met with the prosecutor. Karen ended up being charged with assault, harassment, and violating disability rights laws. She took a plea deal and was sentenced to community service, a fine, and mandatory sensitivity training. The HOA board sent us a formal, written apology and removed Karen from her position. At the next meeting, the board president made a public statement condemning Karen's actions and reaffirming that I was welcome at all neighborhood events. We want to sincerely apologize for the inexcusable treatment our neighbor received. This kind of discrimination has no place in our community. We are committed to making our neighborhood welcoming and accessible for all residents. It took me a while to feel comfortable going to the meetings again, but slowly, with Tom's support and encouragement from our other neighbors, I started getting more involved again. We even joined the committee working on improving accessibility throughout the neighborhood. Looking back, I'm still amazed at how quickly things escalated with Karen. I never imagined someone could be so blatantly cruel and discriminatory. But I'm grateful for how my husband and community rallied around me. It showed me that for every Karen in the world, there are many more good people willing to stand up against hate and ignorance. I won't pretend it's easy living with a disability. There are still plenty of challenges and bad days, but I refuse to let people like Karen make me feel less worthy or push me out of public spaces. This is my home and my community too. I have just as much right to be here as anyone else. These days I make a point of being visible in my community. I go to every HOA meeting, neighborhood picnic, and local event I can. Not just for myself, but for anyone else who might feel unwelcome or out of place. I want them to see that they belong here too. As for Karen, I heard she moved away not long after everything happened. I can't say I'm sad to see her go, but I do hope she learned something from all of this. Maybe next time she encounters someone different from her, she'll think twice before letting her discomfort turn to cruelty. In the end, yes, there are entitled, nasty people out there who will try to make you feel small. But there are also countless others ready to stand beside you and lift you up. Those are the people I choose to focus on now. They are the ones who make our neighborhood truly feel like home. Here I am telling you about the time my boss's stubbornness almost cost us a big job. It all started about a month ago when I was working as an industrial painter. You know, the kind of guy who paints machinery and stuff. Usually, when I get a job, they tell me what paint to use and what color they want. It's pretty straightforward most of the time, but this particular day, things were different. I got this job that was anything but typical. The client wanted me to use water-based paint on a carbon steel job. Now, for those of you who don't know much about painting or metals, using water-based paint on carbon steel is like asking for trouble. It's a recipe for rust, and rust is not something you want on your machinery. I knew this was going to be a problem, so I went to talk to my boss, Maddie. I found her in her office typing away on her computer. "Hey Maddie, got a minute?" "Sure, what's up?" "It's about this new job. They want us to use water-based paint on carbon steel. And, well, that's not gonna work. The paint will make the steel rust." I expected her to understand. After all, she's been in this business for years. But what she said next left me dumbfounded. "I don't care, just use the paint. They are going to be here next week." "But Maddie, you don't understand. This is going to ruin the job. Look, we don't have time for this. Just do what the client wants." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like talking to a brick wall. But I've been in this game long enough to know that sometimes you need to cover your own back. Alright, if that's what you want. But can you write down the paint I'm supposed to use and sign it? Fine, if it'll make you do your job. She scribbled down the instructions and signed the paper. I took it, knowing full well this was going to come back to bite us. The next day I started the prep work. It took me a full day to get everything ready. Then I painted the machinery as instructed. I used the water-based paint on a carbon steel, all the while shaking my head at the disaster I knew was coming. After I finished painting, I left it to dry and cure for a couple of days. The whole time I was just waiting for the other shoe to drop. And boy, did it drop. A week later, Maddie came storming into my work area. Her face was red, and she looked like she was about to explode. "What did you do? The job looks horrible. There is rust showing through the metal. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. I've been expecting this, but it didn't make it any easier. I followed your instructions to the letter, Maddie. I told you again and again that water and air will make metal rust. But how could this happen? We've never had this problem before. Well, that's because we've never used water-based paint on carbon steel before. It's basic chemistry. We went back and forth for a while. Maddie tried to blame me, saying I must have done something wrong, but I stood my ground. I showed her the paper she had signed, proving that I had done exactly what she told me to do. Finally, after what felt like hours of arguing, Maddie's shoulders slumped. She realized she had made a mistake. Okay, fine, I was wrong. But how do we fix this? I couldn't help but feel a little satisfied. It's not often the bosses admit they are wrong. Well, the best option is to sandblast it. We need to get all the paint off and then use an oil-based paint. Enamel will be best. That sounds expensive and time-consuming. It is, but it's the only way to fix this mess and give the client a product that won't fall apart on them. Maddie sighed and nodded. She knew I was right this time. Alright, I'll get you the sand you need. Just make sure this doesn't happen again. Trust me, it won't. As long as you listen to me when I say something won't work. And that's how my boss learned to trust my judgment. It was a hard lesson, but sometimes that's what it takes. Since then, whenever I tell her something won't work, she listens. No more water-based paint on carbon steel. You think that will be the end of it, right? Well, not quite. The next day I started the sandblasting process. It's not an easy job, let me tell you. You're basically shooting sand at high speeds to strip off all the paint and rust. It's loud, it's messy, and it takes forever. While I was working on it, Maddie came by to check on the progress, and she looked shocked at the state of the machinery. Is all this really necessary? Yep, we need to get every bit of that water-based paint and rust off before we can start over. How long is this going to take? Probably a couple of days for the sandblasting. Then we need to let it dry completely before we can start painting again. The client is not going to be happy about this delay. Well, they are going to be a lot less happy if their machinery rusts through in a few months. She nodded, finally seeming to understand the gravity of the situation. I'll handle the client. You just focus on fixing this. For the next few days, I worked non-stop on that machinery. Sandblasting, cleaning, prepping for the new paint job. It was exhausting work, but I knew it had to be done right. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the machinery was ready for painting. This time I used the oil-based enamel paint. It is perfect for metal surfaces because it creates a hard, durable finish that protects against rust and corrosion. As I was finishing up the new paint job, Maddie came by again. She looked at the machinery, then at me. It looks really good. That's because we're doing it the right way this time. Listen, I wanted to apologize. I should have listened to you from the beginning. I was surprised, actually. It's not often you hear a boss apologize. Thanks, I appreciate that. Just remember next time I say something won't work. I know, I'll listen. You're the expert here. After that, things changed at work. Maddie started consulting me more on jobs, especially when it came to unusual requests from clients. She even started sending other painters to me for advice on tricky jobs. The client, by the way, was thrilled with the final result. They had no idea about the drama behind the scenes, and that's exactly how it should be. They got a top quality paint job that will last for years, and we learned a valuable lesson about communication and trusting expertise. You know, it's funny. Sometimes it takes a disaster to make people realize the value of experience and knowledge. I've been painting industrial machinery for years, and I've seen all kinds of mistakes and mishaps. But this one takes the cake. But hey, at least something good came out of it. Now, whenever there is a question about what paint to use or how to approach a job, Maddie comes to me first. No more last-minute decisions or ignoring expert advice. In this line of work, you can't afford to cut corners or ignore basic signs. Rust doesn't care about deadlines or client requests. It'll happen whether you want it to or not if you don't take the right precautions. So yeah, that's my story. Remember folks, always listen to the experts in their field. It might save you a whole lot of time, money, and headaches in the long run. And if you ever need something painted, make sure you use the right kind of paint. Trust me on this one. My name's Rachel, and I've always prided myself on raising my two boys, Tyler and Adam, to be respectful, especially towards women. But what happened last week has left me questioning everything. It all started when Tyler, who's 21, and Adam, who's 17, went to spend time with their uncles. I've always been pretty laid back about them having a drink or two at home, even though Adam's underage. I figure it's better they learn about alcohol in a safe environment than experiment at some wild party. So when I heard they were drinking at their uncle Tony's place, I wasn't too worried. Tony lives with his fiancée Linda and her 16-year-old daughter Kate. I thought they were in good hands. Boy, was I wrong. The next day, Adam came home looking sheepish. I knew something was up, so I pressed him for details. What he told me made my blood run cold. Adam says, "Mom, we kinda played a prank on Kate last night." "What kind of prank?" I ask. "Well, we were all hanging out and Kate had gone to bed early. Uncle Tony thought it would be funny to wake her up, and we went to the store and bought these huge cream pies. You know, the ones from the bakery downtown?" "Go on." "Then we snuck into her room. Tyler put on his old clown mask, and when Kate woke up, what did you do?" "We threw the pies at her." I felt sick to my stomach. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My boys, along with their uncles, had invaded a young girl's privacy while she was sleeping and vulnerable. 4 grown men against 1 teenage girl. It was beyond wrong. "Adam, I'm extremely disappointed in you. This is completely unacceptable behavior." "But Mom, it was just a prank. Kate's fine. Her mom even said so." "That doesn't make it right. You violated her privacy and personal space. How do you think she felt, waking up to find 4 men in her room?" "We didn't mean any harm. Intent doesn't matter here. What you did was wrong, period." I was furious. I called Tyler immediately. "Tyler, I just heard about what happened at Uncle Tony's. I'm incredibly disappointed in you." "Mom, it's not a big deal. We were just having some fun." "Fun? You think scaring a young girl in her sleep is fun? I thought I raised you better than this." "Kate's not even mad about it. You're overreacting." "I'm not overreacting. What you did was a violation of trust and privacy. I expected more from you, especially as the older brother." "Whatever, Mom. I'm an adult now. You can't tell me what to do." His dismissive attitude only made me angrier. I realized I couldn't really punish Tyler since he was an adult, but Adam was still under my roof. I made a decision right then and there. "Adam, you're grounded for the entire summer." "What? Mom, that's not fair." "No friends, no car, no phone. You need to understand the severity of what you've done." "But Mom, it's my second to last summer before college. You can't do this." "I can and I am. Your actions have consequences." Adam stormed off to his room, slamming the door behind him. I felt terrible, but I knew I had to stand my ground and do something. This wasn't just about a prank gone wrong. It was about teaching my sons to respect women and their boundaries. The next day, my phone was buzzing non-stop. First, it was Uncle Tony. "Rachel, do you think you're being a bit harsh on Adam?" "No, I don't. What you all did was completely unacceptable." "Come on, we were just having some fun. Boys will be boys, you know." That's exactly the kind of attitude that leads to this behavior. You're an adult, Tony. You should have known better. Look, if anyone wants to blame, it's me. I egged them on. How could Adam resist? He's just a kid. He's old enough to know right from wrong. And you should be ashamed of yourself for encouraging this. I hung up, my hands shaking with anger. Then Linda, Kate's mom, called. "Rachel, I heard you grounded Adam for the whole summer. Don't you think that's a bit much?" "Linda, they invaded your daughter's privacy. How are you okay with this?" "Kate's fine. She thought it was funny after the initial shock wore off. Kids play pranks all the time." This wasn't just a harmless prank. They entered her room while she was sleeping. 4 men against 1 girl. Can't you see how wrong that is? I think you're blowing this out of proportion. Kate's not traumatized or anything. That's not the point. It's about respect and boundaries. I'm trying to teach my sons that this behavior is not okay. "Well, I think you're being crazy. But it's your kid, I guess." I couldn't believe how dismissive everyone was being about this. It felt like I was the only one who saw how serious this was. Even my husband Tom tried to convince me to lighten up. "Honey, Don't you think grounding Adam for the whole summer is a bit extreme? No, I don't. What they did was wrong on so many levels. I agree, it wasn't right, but kids make mistakes. Maybe we could cut it down to a week or two? Tom, this isn't just about punishment. It's about teaching them that actions have consequences. If we let this slide, what message are we sending here? I get that, but a whole summer? It's a long time for a teenager. It's a long time to think about what he did and why it was wrong. I just think you might be overreacting a little. It was just a prank that got out of hand. Listen, there is no compromise when it comes to respecting women, Tom. The punishment stands. As the days went by, the tension in our house was palpable. Adam sulked in his room, barely speaking to me. Tyler stopped coming around as much, clearly avoiding my disapproving looks. Even Tom seemed frustrated with my decision. But I stood firm. I knew in my heart that this was a crucial moment in my son's lives. If I let this slide, what would they think was acceptable behavior in the future? I couldn't bear the thought of my boys growing up to be men who didn't respect women's boundaries. One evening, about a week into Adam's grounding, he came to me with tears in his eyes. Mom, can we talk? Of course, honey. What's on your mind? I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and I think I understand now why you're so upset. Go on. At first, I thought it was just a harmless prank, but then I imagined if someone did that to me or to you or to my future daughter, and it made me feel sick. I'm glad you're starting to see it from a different perspective. I'm really sorry, Mom. What we did was wrong and we shouldn't have gone into Kate's room, especially while she was sleeping. It doesn't matter if she says she's okay with it now. We violated her privacy and probably scared her. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Finally, someone understood. Thank you for saying that, Adam. It means a lot to me that you thought about this and realized why it was wrong. I know I'm still grounded and I accept that. But is there anything I can do to make amends? Well, I think a sincere apology to Kate will be a good start. Not just for the prank, but for invading her privacy and making her feel unsafe in her own home. Okay, I can do that. Over the next few weeks, things slowly started to improve. Adam made his apology to Kate, which she appreciated. He started volunteering at a local shelter, and I could see the experience was really opening his eyes. Tyler took a bit longer to come around, but after a long talk with Adam, he too realized the gravity of what they had done. He joined Adam in volunteering. Uncle Tony and Linda's fiancé eventually apologized too, admitting that as adults, they should have known better. It wasn't easy, but slowly our family started to heal from this horrible